I'm gonna show you how to bend a sheet of metal with the English wheel. The English wheel is a machine which has two wheels, one a bit more flat and one a bit more rounded. And if you put a sheet of metal in between and you apply pressure and roll it by hand, you actually get a bend in the metal, and you can play around with that a bit. What you see here is me measuring the shape I want to make. Usually I kind of improvise that. This time it was a circle, and this circle I'm cutting out in a cutting machine. This has a straight knife, but if you cut out very small pieces bit by bit, you get a pretty good look at a circle. You see this little light in between? That's where the cutting happens, and if you look really closely, you can very precisely, for a pretty big machine, cut out very small pieces. You always have to cut up to 50 or 100 small pieces. Here I'm using the grinding machine to even out the small details I can't even out with the bigger cutting machine. Here we actually see the English wheel. You have the bigger wheel on top, which is more flat, and the smaller wheel, which is more rounded. You have multiple of these smaller wheels, which are more flat or more rounded. It's up to you which you want to use. Ideally, you use one which is kind of equal to the bend the plate already has, but this usually applies when you already shape the metal with a hammer. I don't, so I can pick anything. I use the handle to apply pressure and to remove and insert the metal without scratching or bending it. And I also use the handle underneath the machine to apply more or less pressure depending on how I want the bend to turn out. Because it's manual, I have quite good control of where I want to bend and how I want it to look, and if I need to compensate it in any way. Here you see a different point of view of the English wheel and me with a bigger sheet of metal. And what you see here is me working from a middle point to the outer edges. And I usually do this. I pick a point, a centered point, which doesn't actually have to be centered. And from that point, I'm working outwards. This ensures this kind of rounded bend with this middle point which lights up, because I never actually cross it. So I work from that point out, back to the point, out, back to the point, but I never cross the point. The bending then has happened and we move to the polishing machine. And this is quite a relevant final touch. The polishing machine is actually like a very fine grinding machine. You use a polishing paste. You have 4 colors of these, and every color is more fine. You start with the left wheel, you put on the paste, then you move your object around the wheel. This applies quite a lot of pressure on the object. Like you just saw, I also touch my finger with the wheel, which is not ideal. You move from the left wheel to the right wheel to clean up the polishing paste. You clean the left wheel again with this brush you will see in a bit. You put on the finer paste, you polish again, you go to the right wheel, you clean it. You clean the left wheel, you polish with a, yet again, finer polishing paste, and you go right and back and forth and back and forth. And at a certain point you get a very shiny object. For me, the polishing interacts really nicely with the centered bend. If the centered bend in a way reminds you of the sun, and this middle point working outwards to the edges, the way the polishing machine actually emphasizes a form of reflection, you get these appealing, shaped, bended objects.